Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Airstrikes, barrel bombs have rained down upon rebel-held neighborhoods in eastern Aleppo today as Russia announced the start of a major operation in the Syrian provinces of Idlib and Homs. Russia denies it has resumed attacks on Aleppo, but said it had launched missiles at jihadist groups elsewhere. Activists fear the resumption signals that the government's assault on the east will now be stepped up. Our chief correspondent, Alex Thompson, has this report.
The weeks of warnings are over. Today, Russia's battle group went to war as Europe talked and the US admitted failure. Cruise missiles from the frigate Admiral Grigorovich today launched at Idlib and Homs provinces in northern Syria. Russian Defense Ministry pictures showing the Kuznetsov carrier doing the job she steamed through the English Channel to do, fight a war for the first time. Yesterday, one of her planes crashed, the pilot ditching, but today in Moscow, the brass wanted to announce history in the making.
For the first time in Russian naval history, the aircraft carrier was involved in combat actions.
But hold on for a sec, let's bring that plane back on deck. Closer inspection reveals only air-to-air missiles. Unequipped to bomb Syrian rebels, these flights, not filmed today, appear to be for reconnaissance and PR. Russia says it didn't bomb rebel-held, besieged East Aleppo today and added it hasn't done so for 28 days. But as these pictures indicate, there were airstrikes into that zone today, the Syrian government confirming attacks. Today, the World Food Programme said shortages in East Aleppo are now becoming critical.
We're extremely concerned about the situation in eastern Aleppo at the moment, where the last food rations that have been provided by the UN have been given out. It's very hard to say how people will be coping there.
As if to underline that, for the first time, street protests in East Aleppo yesterday against food shortages, surreptitiously filmed, demanding the overthrow of the makeshift administration. Shots were fired. By no means all of East Aleppo is reduced to rubble like this. Where undamaged buildings exist, and in many areas they do, people are growing their own food on the rooftops to eke out supplies as the siege continues. There is suffering, of course, on both sides in this divided city. Russian TV and Syrian governments reporting in recent days that rebels have used shells loaded with chlorine gas to attack West Aleppo on several occasions. Syrian government forces also stand accused of using gas in the city. So as Russia ramps up its war plan, America, lost, nowhere, owns up to total strategic failure in Syria.
We're going to have to continue to try to pursue, as best we can, a political solution, and in the interim, put as much pressure as we can to the parties to arrive at humanitarian safe spaces and ceasefires that at least alleviate the suffering that's on the ground. I recognize that that has not worked, and it is something that I continue to think about every day.
A lame duck president ponders failure every day, he says, but leaves millions of Syrians on all sides just pondering survival every day.
Well, I've been speaking via the internet to people on both sides of the front lines in Aleppo. In a moment, we'll hear the view from the government-controlled West. But first, I talked to English teacher Wissam Zaka, who is in the besieged eastern part of the city. I asked him what he'd witnessed today, how often the airstrikes are happening.
I can't tell, because here, like in my neighborhood, over the past hour, 2 places were attacked. I don't know where exactly, but it seems we are in the south. In the West, it's heavier. Every now and then, someone would send the voice of the warplane to the sky and the sound of the rockets exploding. No one can tell how heavy the shelling is. Usually, number of victims would tell something. We don't have the numbers for today yet. Like 2 people died in my neighborhood. It wasn't from a warplane. Sorry. It's a warplane. Now my neighborhood is targeted now. And in the afternoon, it started afternoon after 12. At that time I was at school. I heard the sound, but I wasn't sure if they were from warplanes. I discovered later when I finished school at 4 that people were looking at the sky trying to know what's happening or where is the next target. So it seems that the attacks from the sky are back again.
You say you were at school when it started again.
Yeah.
How did the children react?
In fact, they didn't know. It wasn't in that neighborhood, and the nature of the building, and because it's a bit noisy at school, they didn't realize that warplanes were back in the sky. They discovered that when they left school. The people were looking at the sky, as I told you. But like at school, we didn't know that it was from warplanes. We just heard some noise. We thought, as usual, it's from artillery or such things.
What do you think this means for you?
But it's a new stage. It's clear that it's a new stage. Like we've heard that the regime militias are preparing themselves to attack. So maybe this is just the start.
And food is running out there. Can you tell me what the situation is? How much do people have?
Yeah, here we depend a lot on bread in our eating regime. So bread is getting more difficult to get.
Wissam Zaka talking to me from East Aleppo a little earlier. Well, now the view from the government-held West and Aleppo's MP, Farah Shahabi. Did he recognise the reports of bombing happening right now in East Aleppo?
Actually, few airstrikes took place at that hit Al-Qaeda headquarters in eastern Aleppo. But so far, nothing like the international coalition process in Mosul. We would like to see even half of what's going on in Mosul.
If what you say is correct, and that there are civilians who don't want to be trapped in East Aleppo right now, isn't there a grave danger that many of them are going to be killed by Syrian bombing in the next few days?
Look, our bombing is not random, it's not blind. And we gave them so many ceasefires. Just let us just remember this. We gave them 4 or 5 consecutive ceasefires, and we set up safety corridors. Just last Friday, that was last time we set up a safety corridor. They don't use it. They don't want to get out peacefully.
But according to your
Yes.
own figures, there are approximately 5,000 or 6,000 fighters in eastern Aleppo, people you call terrorists.
Yes,
and there are more than 200,000 civilians, perhaps 250,000. We've already seen it happen in the past. We know what happens now. We know how this goes. You're going to kill a lot of people.
Look, who's going to kill a lot of people are not us, are the ones who are taking them human shields and hiding behind them. Bear in mind, these civilians are our civilians. They are our relatives. They are our cousins. They are our friends. And we will free them. It's not like we're going to bomb them. And this is not only an air campaign. There are going to be troops on the ground. There are going to be police forces. And we will open safety corridors.
The people in the East, many of them say that they do not trust the civilian corridors as long as they are being run by Syrian and Russian forces. Would you be prepared to invite in the United Nations or other international groups to ensure the safety of those humanitarian corridors?
Look, the safety corridors worked in so many places in Syria. in Damascus area and Homs. So many places. I'm not talking about 1 or 2 places. I'm talking about 20 or 30 different occasions where we had safety corridors and people chose to leave or people chose to settle, to do reconciliation. This is not something, to really dig into. We are not the ones under question here.
Aleppo's MP, Farah Shahabi, speaking to me earlier.
I've been getting away with it all